This wasn't a royal return, it was a public collapse dressed up as destiny. Because Prince Harry didn't come back to Britain by choice, he was dragged back by consequences he thought would never catch up to him. Everything he built outside the crown, every deal, every escape plan, every carefully curated new life didn't just crack, it imploded. And when it did, there was nowhere left to run. Because behind the polished interviews and emotional speeches, a silent storm had already been forming. And the moment it hit, it didn't just shake his world, it erased it. The world woke up to a shockwave on January 28, 2026. A cold, calculated announcement from Buckingham Palace. No warmth, no sympathy, just brutal clarity. Harry wasn't returning home as a son or even as a prince. He was coming back as a liability. And the most chilling part, the palace didn't even try to soften it, because this wasn't family business anymore. This was damage control. Behind the scenes, the truth was even darker. Harry hadn't decided to leave the United States. He had been pushed out, forced, cornered. His legal status, his entire identity in America collapsed like a house of cards. For years, he lived under an elite visa meant for extraordinary individuals, the kind reserved for global icons. But by late 2025, that illusion started crumbling. Deals vanished, connections disappeared, support evaporated, and suddenly the man who once had billion-dollar platforms couldn't even secure a single sponsor to keep him legally in the country. But the real bombshell? It wasn't the failed deals. It was his own words, his own confessions, his own truth turned into evidence. Because when Harry proudly revealed his past, drug use, reckless behavior, moments he framed as honesty, he didn't realize he was building a legal case against himself. What once made headlines as brave became something far more dangerous behind closed doors, admissible risk. And when authorities started digging, they didn't see vulnerability. They saw liability. That's when everything accelerated. Quiet investigations, silent legal reviews, high-level pressure, and then the final blow. His visa, gone. His appeals, rejected. His influence, useless. And just like that, the illusion shattered. He had 10 days. 10 days to pack up a life he spent years building. 10 days before he would no longer belong anywhere he had chosen. And the clock was ticking. But what makes this collapse even more brutal is that it wasn't just legal. It was financial. Because while the world saw luxury, behind the gates of Montecito, the reality was unraveling fast. Missed payments, mounting debts, quiet warnings from banks turning into official notices. The mansion that once symbolized freedom, it was slipping away. Foreclosure was no longer a rumor, it was reality closing in. And then came the whispers that turned into something even more explosive. Unpaid millions, broken financial obligations, strained relationships with powerful allies who had once opened doors for him. The support system wasn't just weakening, it was abandoning him, piece by piece, until nothing remained. And suddenly, the man who once walked behind royal guards found himself with no protection at all. No diplomatic shield, no elite privileges, no invisible safety net, just a plane ticket. One way, back to the place he once escaped. And the way he left, that's where it gets even more haunting. There were no farewell statements, no grand exits, no orchestrated goodbye, just silence, followed by movement, under federal supervision, escorted, controlled, and stripped of everything that once made him untouchable. The image alone tells the story. Harry boarding a commercial flight. No entourage, no ceremony, no power, just another passenger, except everyone knew who he used to be. And that contrast, that's what made it devastating. Because this wasn't just a relocation. This was a fall, a complete transformation from royalty to reality. And while he was flying across the Atlantic, something even colder was happening back in Britain. The palace wasn't preparing a welcome, they were preparing a boundary. Because insiders revealed something chilling, this wasn't about bringing Harry back into the fold. It was about containing him, managing him, ensuring that whatever chaos followed him didn't infect the institution he once represented. Even his former home, gone. Security privileges, revoked. Access, blocked. Every door that once opened automatically was now firmly shut. And the message couldn't have been clearer. You're not coming back as one of us, you're coming back as someone we have to deal with. And that shift, that emotional distance, it cuts deeper than any headline. Because for the first time in his life, Harry wasn't protected by the crown. He was exposed to it. But here's where things take an even more dramatic turn. Because while Harry was losing everything, his status, his home, his identity, someone else was already making moves. Calculated, precise, strategic. Meghan Markle wasn't waiting for the fallout, she was preparing for survival. And what she did next would change everything. Because as Harry fought to stay afloat, Meghan was quietly separating herself from the sinking ship. Legally, financially, emotionally. Meetings were happening behind closed doors. Decisions were being made without him, and by the time he realized what was unfolding, it was already too late, because this wasn't just a crisis anymore. This was a split in motion, a silent detachment happening in real time. And the night everything finally came to the surface, it wasn't explosive. It wasn't loud. It was cold, calculated, final. Harry walked in, desperate, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping through his fingers. But what he heard instead wasn't support. It was a line drawn in the sand, a moment that would redefine everything he thought was still intact. And in that quiet exchange, the truth became undeniable. He wasn't just losing his country. He wasn't just losing his status. He was losing his last ally. And from that moment on, he was completely on his own. And just when it felt like the fall couldn't get any colder, reality hit even harder the moment Prince Harry stepped onto British soil. Because this wasn't a homecoming, it was a processing, a procedure, a quiet humiliation disguised as routine. The plane doors opened at Heathrow, rain slicing across the runway like a warning. No royal convoy, no blacked out vehicles, no protection team waiting to shield him from the world, just silence and protocol. For the first time in his life, Harry wasn't escorted as a royal, he was handled as a civilian, and the system made sure he felt it. His passport didn't glide through diplomatic channels anymore. It triggered alerts, questions, scrutiny, the kind of treatment ordinary people face every single day, but for him, it was something he had never experienced. And that's what made it so brutal, because in that moment, the illusion was completely gone. No privilege, no special status, just Henry Charles Albert David standing in a side room waiting like everyone else. And outside, the world was already watching. Breaking news alerts exploded across headlines, cameras flashed, social media spiraled. The narrative wasn't subtle, it was savage. This wasn't Prince returns home, this was Prince falls from grace. And the image that spread globally said everything. Head down, hood up, alone. A man who once stood at the center of global admiration, now reduced to a symbol of collapse. But behind the scenes, something even more ruthless was unfolding. Because while the public saw a fallen prince, the palace saw a threat that had to be contained. And that's where the most chilling part of this entire saga comes into play. Operation Iron Gate. A phrase whispered inside royal walls like a code red. Not for a foreign enemy, not for a national crisis, but for one man, Harry. Because according to insiders, this wasn't about reconciliation, it was about control. Every step of his return had already been mapped out. Where he could go, where he couldn't, who he could contact, who would ignore him. And the architects behind it, Prince William and Princess Anne. Not out of cruelty, but out of calculation. Because to them, Harry wasn't just family anymore. He was a risk, a walking headline, a man who had already proven he could damage the institution from the outside. And now he was back inside the country. That couldn't be left unchecked. So the orders were clear. No royal housing, no security reinstatement, no access to inner circles, no shortcuts, nothing. Even the place he once called home, Frogmore Cottage, was locked, cleared, and completely off limits. Every symbolic tie severed. And the message behind it? Ice cold. You burned the bridge. Now you stand on the other side of it, alone. But if you think that was the lowest point, it wasn't. Because the moment that truly shattered everything came next. The phone call. The one call that could have changed everything. The one call that could have softened the fall even slightly. Harry reached out. Not to lawyers, not to advisors, but to his father, King Charles III. And for a brief second, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, blood would outweigh everything else. But inside Clarence House, the atmosphere was heavy. Years of tension, betrayal, public attacks, private wounds, all hanging in the air. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. Charles hesitated. You could almost feel the weight of that moment, the pull between father and king. But then a voice cut through the silence. William. Firm, unshaken. A single word that carried everything. Don't. And just like that, the call went unanswered. That wasn't just rejection. That was closure. Because in that moment, it became painfully clear this wasn't a temporary rift anymore. This was a permanent line. Harry wasn't being welcomed back into the family. He was being kept at a distance from it. And if that didn't hit hard enough, the public reaction made sure it did. Because the media didn't hold back. Not this time. Old scandals resurfaced like ghosts refusing to stay buried. Teenage drug use, controversial choices, embarrassing moments moments that had once been forgiven now rebranded as warning signs. Every mistake, every confession, every misstep repackaged into one brutal narrative. This was inevitable. The rise and the fall. And what made it worse? People believed it, because the same honesty that once made Harry relatable was now being used to dismantle him piece by piece. The memoir that was supposed to free him, it became the blueprint of his collapse. Every page a new layer of scrutiny. Every story a new reason to question him. And suddenly, the man who once controlled his narrative lost it completely. But while Harry was drowning in that storm, across the ocean, someone else was doing the exact opposite. Meghan Markle wasn't looking back. She was moving forward, fast, calculated moves, strategic silence, clean separation. Her brand repositioned, her image refocused, her future independent. And the message, unspoken but loud, was impossible to ignore. She wasn't going down with him. While Harry sat in isolation, she stepped into reinvention. While he faced scrutiny, she built distance. While his world closed in, hers expanded outward. And that contrast, that's what made the entire situation even more brutal, because it showed one thing clearly. This wasn't just a shared downfall. It was a divergence. Two paths, splitting in opposite directions. One rising, one collapsing. And back in Britain, reality settled in for Harry in the most haunting way possible. No palace, no protection, no plan, just a quiet cottage on the outskirts of Oxfordshire. A temporary refuge that felt more like exile. For the first time in his life, there were no layers between him and the consequences of his choices. No institution absorbing the impact. No system shielding him, just silence. And that silence, it's louder than any headline, because in that silence, everything becomes clear. The crown he once ran from, it didn't chase him. It simply closed its doors. And now, standing outside of it, looking in, he's realizing something that changes everything. It was never just a family. It was a fortress. And once you walk away from it, you don't just lose the title. You lose the protection, the power, the identity. And sometimes you lose the way back entirely, because this isn't the end of the story. Not even close. This is just the moment where the illusion breaks completely and the consequences begin. The world is still watching. The palace is still calculating. And Meghan, she's already rewriting the next chapter. But Harry, he's left facing the one thing he never truly prepared for, life without the crown. And this time, there's no one left to catch him.